Hi everyone, welcome to this data visualization webcast. I hope you enjoy the content that we brought to you today. My name is Allan. I'll be hosting the first part of the event. I'm joined by my colleague Brendan, who will take over in the second half. We're both consultants at Thorogood. Quick agenda here. I'm going to talk very quickly about Thorogood and what we do, then discuss some theory, history, and best practices of data visualization, which is something we work a lot with. And then Brendan is going to take you guys through some more concrete examples using Power BI. So Thorogood is a data engineering, data science, and data visualization specialist firm. We're a consultancy firm. We operate globally. We have offices in London, Philadelphia, Boston, Singapore, São Paulo, which is where I'm joining from today, and Bangalore. And we work with basically everything in that spectrum of data engineering, data science, data visualization, business intelligence, and analytics. Anywhere from more strategic projects, conceptual, provide a different range of data services like hosting and training. But mainly what we do is end-to-end implementations of data solutions. And we focus a lot on analytics, technology, and business focus to make sure every solution that we develop brings actual business value to our customers and are not just focused on technology itself. We work with different technology partners, so AWS, Microsoft, Databricks, Tableau, and a couple others. That guarantees us to be able to help our customers in a wide range of technologies and gets us closer to these partners in the technology conferences and things like that, which brings a bunch of advantages. Since today's topic is data visualization, I wanted to highlight our experience with this field. We've been working with that for over 30 years. We have certified consultants in Power BI and Tableau, which are the leading data visualization tools in the market today. We have crafted a methodology to develop dashboards over the years, and we apply that with our customers pretty often. And we also, like I said, keep close relationship with Microsoft and Tableau. So we're always up to date on new features of Power BI and Tableau, and we're always delivering trainings in these tools, which I invite you to join. Brenda will mention what's coming up next at the end of the event. Okay, so some very quick history of data visualization. It's been around for a long time, and it's been applied in different scenarios. This is from 1854 in England. The country was going through a cholera outbreak, and a doctor decided to plot the deaths due to cholera against a map of the water pumps of the city. It was a contagious disease, and just by putting these data points, which are the deaths, against the water pumps, it helped them realize where most of the deaths were concentrated, and they closed down that pump in the center of the city, and that caused a big impact in the deaths. So very simple but historical use case of data visualization. Now we fast forward about a century and a half later. This example is from The Economist. The Economist has been known for having great visualizations in their magazines for a long time. But this slide and these examples right here are from The Economist Instagram page, actually. And they're really nice, as you can see, really clearly communicate what their articles are trying to say. To display this here, just as an example of how sometimes you need to tweak your visuals depending on the channel and the audience that you're going to go for. So the Instagram, since it's a social media, it requires a lot quicker interpretation of things. So they had to adapt a lot of what they were doing in the magazines to cater to this new channel with a different kind of audience. And then finally, which is the most relevant to us here, is applying data visualization to business intelligence and analytics, right? So we live in an era of digital transformation. We have increasing amounts of data. We have cloud technology, which makes it a lot easier to store and process all of this data to get insights from them. We have even richer insights with more advanced techniques of data science and machine learning, which all brings a competitive advantage to the companies that use these techniques. However, we can only get the maximum business value that all of these things provide if we're able to visualize data. We're humans, we're visual people. If we don't visualize it well, we're not going to extract the most value from everything. So how do we visualize it? how do we create very good visualizations for business intelligence and analytics. So a little bit more theory here before we go into some tips. How does data visualization work? Well, it's basically everything about our brains, right? Like I said, our brains are much quicker to process visual information than just plain text. So you always need to think about how people's brains are going to react to everything you build on a dashboard or a report. Here's a very quick example. I have some number 5s kind of hidden in this slide right here that are kind of hard to spot. But then if I make a couple changes, it becomes a lot easier for our brains. Instantly, we can spot where the number 5s are. And I did 2 things here. I changed the color from gray to black, and I changed the width of the font of those number 5s, by making them bold. So these are 2 visual elements that I played around with to highlight what I wanted to highlight. And there are quite a few other visual elements that we should know about. So I'm going to list them here. Differentiate data points. So we have length, width, orientation, size, shape, enclosure, which is when you have something surrounding the data points, the 2D position of a data point, which is what we see on the scatter plot, for example, grouping, when data points are grouped together, obviously. Color is a pretty good one. So when you can break color down into different attributes like hue, saturation, brightness, and amount of red, green, blue, things like that. And by working with these visual elements, I'm able to guide your eyes to where I want them to look, right? So in the example on the left-hand side is without much formatting, but then I played around with visual elements on the right side to make you look here and not here. So for example, if we have a sales KPI in a daily report, you see that every day. What's the most important thing here? Is it the number or the title? It's the number, right? You're going to see the title every day. You're going to memorize it eventually. So you want to highlight the number, and you can apply these techniques to do that. Very simple example, but let's get into charts and dashboard tips now. So here are some best practices. The first one is about axes versus labels. So both axes and labels actually exist to give us a numeric meaning to the size of something or to any of those other visual elements, right? So they kind of serve the same purpose. And since they serve the same purpose, you only need one of them, right? Sometimes we add both axes and labels, like we do on the left side here. It gets a little bit cluttered. And then we've optimized this chart visually a little bit on the right side. Removed the horizontal axis because we already have the labels here. We've also simplified the labels by dividing them by 1 million. They're cleaner to see. We removed the title of both axes. So for example, these are obviously countries. So you don't need to say that they are countries. Anything that you can save space with, do it. It's going to help your users get to the business message here much more efficiently. So in line with what we just said, let's minimize repetition wherever possible. In this case, we have a bunch of zeros and currency symbols and points and commas here on the vertical axis. But if we choose to just display the title only once, saying that these numbers are in thousands of euros, we can simplify the axis here just to have simple numbers from 0 to 10. The type of detail that you don't spot often, but it's a lot nicer if you clean it up. Use of colors. Sometimes we find ourselves adding a lot of color, trying to make it pretty, but that's not always a good idea. In this case, we have a column chart or a bar chart by product category, and we have already one category per bar, right, per column. So they're already differentiated by that visual element, which is 1 bar for each. So we don't need to differentiate them by color as well. That's just going to add some confusion. It's going to make me go looking for a legend, asking what do these colors mean. So in this particular case, it's a better idea to stick to just one color. Chart types, we can talk a lot about that. I'm going to give just a couple examples. There are many different chart types out there, but this tip right here is about line charts, right? So in this side of the world, Western Hemisphere, we tend to read things from left to right. So when our brains look at a line chart, we tend to think that there's a logical sequence between things, right? And that's not the case here, right? The data is not going from chairs to couches to rugs. They're just independent, separate categories. So in this case, a bar chart is a better option. So let's save our line charts for date or anything that actually has a logical sequence. Pie charts, that's something that people use still sometimes. It's been used for a long time, but it's not very efficient, right? We're going to see another option here. But the reason is it makes your eye have to do a bit of a zigzag between the pie, the labels, the legend, right? So here we have this green slice. We have to go look at the legend, see what it means. Then we go back to the pie chart, back and forth between the chart and the legend. It's kind of hard to see which one of these two top slices is bigger, unless you look at the actual label, 1.8, 1.6, you can see that this one is bigger, but otherwise it's a bit hard to see. And that's because we only have 4 slices, so if we have more than 10, for example, it'd be a lot harder even. So if we change this to a bar chart, we get a few advantages here. We're able to sort the bars by value, so we can see what's the top one. We can add an average line if we want. We can also have the percentage value in axes and the absolute value in the labels. That is a bit more rich in our numbers here. And generally, it just reduces the amount of movement that we have to do with our eyes. So use these pie charts wisely and not very often. They're okay, but just be careful. One more, color association. So our brains, that's why we use color, but it would tend to associate things that have the same color with each other, right? So suppose we have these two charts right here on the same screen, on the same dashboard, the same page of a report. Kind of hard to tell if the sales on the left side, this chart, are just from Brazil or they are from the whole company. Nothing here is indicating that, but our brain will tend to think that they are just from Brazil because they have the same color, right? So be careful with that. Your users will tend to make that association. If that's not the case, don't use the same color. Save them from, when there's an actual meaning to the color, and be careful with that association. Here about the positioning of things, again, in Western countries, in the Western Hemisphere, we tend to read things in this direction, following the Z shape. So we start in the top left corner. This is where we can put our more high level, macro, most important information. And then we end at the bottom right corner, where we sometimes want to add a table or something that's slower to read, slightly less important, more granular. So yes, pay attention to the positioning of things because that's important. And I have a few examples here of our last and likely most important tip is what I call break down and prioritize. Right, so like we said, we saw with the visual elements, different charts can use different visual elements to display many different things at the same time. So here we have an example of actual to budget variance in thousands of euros. So we have 2 lines, one for the budget and one for the actuals. That means we have 3 metrics, the actual, the budget, and the variance, which is just the distance between each one, like how far or close apart they are at any given week, which is our attribute. So what kind of things are currently displayed in this chart? We can see the budget over time going up and down. We can see the actuals over time going up and down. We can see the variance over time in absolute terms. So as the lines get closer or further apart, we can see that variance changing. And also in percentage terms, right? Percentage would be kind of just the distance. And the absolute, if you look at the axis here, you're able to figure out that this distance here, for example, is about 20,000 euros. So a lot of things, it's really rich, but you might want to prioritize the most relevant business questions. So do that exercise with your users. And then suppose that the most important thing for this case is the variance over time in percentage terms. So one thing that we can do is kind of fix the budget line on a straight line at 0% and only display the variation in percentage terms, how much the actual varied according to the budget. right? So we lose a bit of richness here and how many things we're displaying, but we're displaying this one a lot better. One more example about the same tip of breaking down and prioritizing. This is what we call a stacked column chart. So we have units sold of certain products by different brands. So 5 brands in 6 months. So we have 2 attributes, brand and month. And our metrics are the units sold, which you can see in this axis, and the share, which is basically the percentage of each brand at any given month, right? We can see that the green one here is a bit smaller, these 2 are bigger, etc. So again, very rich chart. We're looking at a few things at the same time. We can see the total units sold over time, which is the total size of the bar, right? We can see that it goes down and then up and then slightly down again. We can see the brand units sold over time. So here, if we look at the axis, just of the gray slice, we're able to figure out how many thousand units that means. You can see that it goes down in the second month, then it goes up here again. Again, a little bit of zigzag, but we're able to see these brand units sold over time. Also the share over time, the most and least dominant brands, you can see how that changes over time. Slightly, it's there, it's not super easy to see, but it's there. And I guess the total brand share as well, which is kind of the average share across the whole 6 months. So again, very rich, everything is there at the same time, but suppose we prioritize things with our users and with the business message we're trying to get across, and we decide that these 2 points here are the most important. So the total units sold over time, we chose to display here using a simple bar chart, just with the totals, without breaking down into brands. So we have the labels, we can see very quickly the going down and then up. And then we also wanted to show the brand share over time, and we chose a separate visual to do that. So this is a colored table, or sometimes called a heat map. And the numbers here are just the percentage of each brand at that month. So we can see very quickly that brand C is the darkest one and hence the most dominant. We can see that there's a gap, this dip in brand D in months 2 and 3, and a few other insights. So that's much more clearly communicated. On the same example, just to wrap up, if we chose to prioritize the other 2 bullet points, so the brand units sold over time and the total brand share, you can do that with area charts. So here I chose 1 area chart per brand just to see the trend, right? We don't have numbers, but we just want to see the movement up and down at each individual brand. And that's a lot easier to see that dip in brand D that we talked about. And we can also very quickly see that brand C is very stable and dominant kind of at the top here. And then we have the average share in percentage terms for the whole period. The last tip is to consider our user, right? We have the whole field of user experience, from software development, UX design, UI design, all of that also thinks about the user, the end user a lot. So when we're building visuals, we have to think about the visuals. So everything that we just talked about in these tips, but we also have to think, who's going to use this? The same data set can generate different visuals, different dashboards, depending on how and who is going to use them. So a few questions to consider in this usability subject. From the user side, we want to think about how technical they are, how senior they are, and which device they're reading from, right? So in terms of seniority, the higher up you go in an organization, the less time people are going to have to click around your dashboard to read stuff. So you want things very digested for them and very quickly to interpret. And sometimes other users, more technical analysts, who have a bit more time to spend on your screen. So you can choose different kinds of some of those richer visuals maybe that require a bit more interpretation time. On the visualization side, this end product, the report or dashboard that you're creating, how is it going to be used? Is it going to be used for data discovery, meaning like the user doesn't have their questions ready and they're just going to play around and explore this data to see what comes up? That will require a certain type of dashboard. If it's something that they just go to read or check every so often, maybe every day, it's a different kind of product that you need to create. Or if they're going to use that for storytelling, Sometimes people want to use a Power BI report to present over in the meeting instead of a PowerPoint presentation. So in that way, you want to think a lot about like the logical sequence between the pages. You can kind of create a story. So all of that is going to give you a different result at the end. And again, just to summarize, the way to a perfect dashboard: understand the business objectives. Everything starts from the business objectives and the strategy of the department that's going to use this. Understand each user and what we just talked about. After that, you can design and mock up a structure. What kind of visuals do I want? Well, how many pages? How do I want to break this down? What's the sequence between them? What's kind of the interaction between the pages? Who's going to filter what kind of thing? Design a logical flow of things. Again, choose the correct visuals, chart types, all of that. Format them properly, clean up, reduce repetition, reduce clutter, make it efficient. Finally, we can tidy up and decorate, and this is where we add things like themes and your company logo, and get the company colors there, and headers and footers and things like that to make it look more professional. It's not always necessary, but it's always nice. After you've done that, repeat. So iterate, do things in an iterative way. That's going to make sure to validate with your end users that what you're creating makes sense and is actually useful to them. And that is going to guarantee adoption, right? That's what we want. We don't want to spend a lot of time creating visuals and then they don't get adopted, they don't get used at the end. So if you follow these steps, they will get adopted. And if they get adopted, and if they're nicely communicated and efficient, that's what's going to get you the business value that we're all looking for, and that data visualization can nicely provide for organizations. So that's it for my part. Thank you. I will switch over to Brendan now.
Okay, so what I'm going to be walking through just a couple of use cases that we've sort of seen at different customers on how choosing the right visual can really assist with the storytelling and readability of your underlying data. Because as Allan was saying, that's the whole point, right? We want to make sure that what we're doing is driving business value and ultimately is ingestible and very, very understandable and usable. So I'm going to be opening Power BI here, and in our first use case, we're going to be looking at sales over time. So it is another example that Allan used, one of his examples, but again, just in Power BI. So we're really looking to answer a couple questions, right? Who is our brand leader and what is our overall market status, right? Who are our competitors and really how is the market growing? And here we have a simple line chart, right? It's going to give us a couple insights. And we can see historically that brand A and B have been swapping that #1 spot within this particular category, and brand C a few months ago, or excuse me, according to the graph, had entered that market and had a substantial impact, eventually becoming that brand leader for a while before tailing off. However, if I change my, the one thing I think that you can you're not able to derive from this visual is that you don't have a sense for how large really the market is, right? So one thing that I can do is I can simply change this to a stacked area chart to give me a better sense of what the market share is, right, for this particular category, to see how large the market is. What I lost, however, is the ability to see who the leader is, with this particular visual. So to combat this, right, I want to understand those two pieces of information, right? I want to know who the market leader is at any given point, and I also want to be able to see how large the market share is. So to kind of do that, we can use something called a ribbon chart. And although it looks a bit confusing initially, right, it takes a bit of understanding to see the value that it's bringing in combining those two metrics or those two ideas, right? So with this ribbon chart, I'm not only able to see the size of the market share, right, for a given period of time, right, but I'm also able to see who is leading that market at a given time. So just by highlighting over a couple of this and just looking at the visual, we can clearly see I've combined essentially the best of both worlds with this visual while not compromising on any of the other ideas that I was sort of getting from my stacked chart here and this line chart here as well, right? So again, it's sort of the ability to take what we really want to show within our dashboard and trying to find the visual that best positions it, so I can see the percent change across time for a given market share. I can see when brands are actually jumping off a given month, right? So again, combining the best of both worlds and finding the right visual is key to really telling that complete business story, right? So another quick example that I'll walk through here before just closing, but It's an example of a use case that Thorogood has worked on previously. And in this example, we're analyzing some customer survey data. So one area of interest when you're looking at customer survey data is this concept of brand switching, right? So we can see where respondents have indicated if they have switched brands, say, from a competitor to my own, or vice versa within the last 6 months. So generally, the areas that I really am interested to know more about, right, are up here. Are we gaining or losing customers, and where those people are actually switching to and from, if I am in fact gaining or losing customers or respondents. So this first table on our left here is going to serve as a good start for analysis, right? But it's really difficult for me to derive anything of value from this table, frankly. So to get a sense of which brands are stealing respondents from others, I may want to create a bar chart that looks to measure, say, the number of switches from a given brand to my competitor or vice versa. So simply, I'm just going to create a simple bar chart here that will essentially take that net switching value and measure, where my competitors are switching, or when they're stealing some of my respondents for their own brands, and vice versa, right? So we get that sense quite visually, apparent for us to ingest. We see that my company, my brand, is actually receiving, a lot of respondents over the survey data, whereas competitor two's brand is really struggling. So this will sort of give me the general magnitude of my respondents. I may want to drill in a bit deeper to understand, where they're actually coming from. So understanding this information can help me understand if there's a given sales strategy, that I'm employing that's extremely successful for one competitor that maybe I want to try for some others. So I'll kind of show you what I mean by that, but in a non-visual form, and what we can kind of do to highlight that in a much more appealing and easily ingestible way. So I'll bring on this matrix visual here to give a sense of where a customer is sort of going to be existing before they were switching, where they will sort of be going after, and the number of respondents that are sort of going to be essentially switching from competitor one to my company, right? So, reverse. So we can see this matrix isn't really telling you much. It's not really visual, although it has all of the underlying data. So to sort of make it much more ingestible and shareable and usable, and really hammering home that business story, I can use something called a Sankey chart. And even still, this isn't perfect, right? But it gives you a much more visual sense of, say, which of competitor 3, right? How many of those respondents are switching to my company, right? So we can see that within that survey data, 50 respondents switched from competitor 3 to my company. And we may want to drill in a bit deeper with additional data, supporting data sets, to try to understand why that happened. But again, like I mentioned, this visual isn't perfect in itself. It's we can tidy and decorate it up, as Allan alluded to, with some additional colors and make it even clearer. So we're sort of left with this final core chart that will ultimately tell the same story as the Sankey chart, but in a much more, I believe, very visualized and good-looking way. So again, the same information, right? So that same competitor 3 data, is apparent. We can see that, from competitor 3, I'm still getting, those 50 respondents from the old competitor to the new. And again, it's just a much more visual way that gives a sense of the magnitudes and where my respondents are switching from competitor 3 to my company. So just to kind of just restate it all, I guess, you can have the best data in the world. You can have it in a tabular form. You can have it in a matrix form. You can have all the data. But to really drive home that value, you got to be able to visualize it in some way so that you can share those insights amongst your organization. To really make them actionable and to really take a step into becoming more data-driven as an organization. So from a demo perspective, that's really all I wanted to share with you guys. That was just using Power BI as Allan alluded to, Microsoft's visualization software. But again, just to kind of touch upon maybe some of Thorogood's additional experience and what we kind of have to offer on our website currently is how our experiences have kind of been with our clients using Power BI and other visualization tools. So we have some case studies on our website with the QR codes that are easily scannable right now, if you'd like to just save them for later. But we can, it's all accessible via our website as well. So this is just all of our some of our experience that we have with our clients where we're really able to illustrate how important these data visualizations are in a given organization. So one other call out here, something very close to my own heart and certainly to Thorogood's, is this sustainability and how it's really emerging as a very important theme amongst our clients and obviously around the world. So utilizing the theme, or excuse me, the concept of robust and powerful data visualizations and really coupling that with this theme of sustainability is a really great way, I think, to apply perhaps a new initiative that your firm is exploring as you're sort of maybe looking at things in a new way when it comes to sustainability and how your company is really measuring its own impact on the climate. You may need to look to see how you can utilize some of these visualization tips and tricks in a more business way. So I really encourage you guys to check out some of these use cases as well on our website. But again, feel free to reach out to Allan and I if you have any questions on the former or the current slide that I'm currently on. That's really all Allan and I had for today. So really appreciate your time paying attention, and please reach out to Allan and I if you have any additional questions on these data visualization concepts and beyond. So thank you very much.